by being aware of how the chakras are controlling and storing sanskaras and karmas, we can be more effective. We can be more conscious and more objective in breaking the shackles of who we are, of breaking the unconscious habits that have entangled us in samsara. So we want to awaken and transcend the chakras. This is an important point. We are not our physical body. We are not our emotions or our astral body. We are not our thoughts. And yet, these three bodies are definitely what we're living through and recycling and changing in cycles of samsara. But we are not them. It is a temporary identification. Vivekananda put it very well. He said, if you say the word I to yourself, and there's even a glimmer of thinking of ourselves as a body, we're living in delusion. Until we can say the word I and not think of the body, we're trapped in samsara. In this sense, awakening the chakras is not enough. Awakening the chakras is not the goal. If we awakened the chakras, we unite Shiva and Shakti at each of them, where we become conscious of our samskaras and our karmas, and we have energy to bend them, to change them. That in and of itself is a wonderful thing, an absolutely necessary thing to achieve emancipation or transcendence. But in and of itself, if we're not constantly reminding ourselves, hoping for an existence not limited to an isolated body of any type, we'll just enter into the cycle of samsara again, only maybe this time at a godlike level of power and insight. But eventually we will fall into inappropriate causal actions, inappropriate astral emotions, and then we're back into a physical dimension. The scriptures of India and people like Paramahansa Yogananda and Dr. Motoyama, they say there have been beings that have lived for thousands of years in a nearly godlike state of power and understanding that ever so subtly and ever so slowly fell back into the trap of egotism and identifying with their thoughts and identifying with their power and identifying with their emotions and eventually identifying with their body and forgetting all that stuff. So awakening the chakras is absolutely necessary, but awakening the chakras is not enough. We must have the humility to bear before us that as we awaken great potentials within us, great powers within us, we must not lose sight of the greater goal. It's not an aggrandizement of our embodied ego. However great and grand we become, whatever things we glimpse and dazzle others with, our insight and our wisdom, whatever dazzling psychedelic experience accompany the unwinding of our sanskaras, this is not the goal. The goal is to become empty of any identification with any body and to transcend them. And this becomes infinitely easier if the chakras are awakened and we're aware of our habits and stand aloof from them and hold them at a distance, our thoughts and our habits, and say, there's a different way to exist. We talk about the cycle of samsara. Something very similar to that is this chakra transformation. We've discussed how chakras control certain things in the physical dimension, control certain things in the astral dimension, and control certain thinking processes in the causal dimension. But what's special is there's an interrelationship between these dimensions. This is where chakra theory steps beyond modern psychological and philosophical speculations. It isn't very hard for a philosopher, a psychologist, a neuroscientist to agree with the idea that there might be other thinking centers in the brain or in the spine that are not awakened yet. It wouldn't be too much of a leap for them to agree to that possibility. What makes chakra theory, and based on the experience of yogis for generations, centuries, is that the thinking about the chakras, meditating on the chakras, and conserving the energy that's flowing out of those chakras to activate the sanskaras, it will change to a higher dimension of function. This is the unique yogic insight. That when I'm unconscious of what moves me, I just move about and go about, moved by my impulses, by my likes and my dislikes. If I sit still and feel the urge to move, to go do that or to do that, and examine it and don't react. That impulse, that energy to jump up and move and go do this or that energy will now be conserved. And if I sit still long enough with the proper technique, it will change. And it'll change from a physical urge to move or breathe, breath being the most primitive physical urge there is. It'll transform into a deeper astral awakening of that chakra. And if we sit with our strong emotions and we don't react to them, but we don't dismiss them, we just sit with them. The yogis say if we sit without reacting to our emotions, that energy will be conserved and change into a greater causal opening, greater wisdom, greater understanding. And so chakra theory is dependent on this process. By coming to a gathered stillness of my physical being, by getting absolutely as still as my abilities allow, by being completely alert of the functioning thoughts and the emotions that are arising from this part of my body and my spine, that energy changes. The magic happens. By suppressing the physical activity, that energy is conserved and transformed into an emotion. And now, rather than just having an impulse to jump and move, we would feel inside of us, what's the emotion that's motivating that? Is it a fearful, anxious thing? Why was I motivated to move? It moves from just being an urge to move that's unconscious to an awareness of the emotions that were motivating me to move. And then beyond that, if we can sit even with that and not be swept too much out of our attention and our focus, if we can live with those emotions and not react to them and watch them pass through us, that energy will be conserved. And if we sit with that, eventually we would become aware of the very, very deeply held ways of thinking, of why we think we need this or that and have these likes or dislikes. We would come to a revelation of our understanding. This essentially is the goal of modern psychotherapy. People who can afford it, by the thousands, go to therapists who ask the therapist, explain to me why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why do I do this? Could you help me? Because I don't know why I get in the same bad relationships over and over again. Can you help me with that? Because I don't know why. The yogis say that's a noble ambition, but it can be done more effectively, or at least it can be assisted by chakra meditation. We can become aware of what is motivating us astrally. What emotions are really underneath the surface of things? All of us know people like, he's an angry guy. I know him, he's an angry guy. I bet he doesn't think of himself as an angry guy. He just is the way that he is. At some point, maybe he'll sit and go like, why am I angry all the time? What am I really upset about? What have I projected elsewhere that's really happening in here? So there's a commonality between the modern psychoanalytic, psychotherapeutic process of if we could get in conscious contact of our deepest primitive motivations, we could deal with them more intelligently. The yogis would say, yeah, that's true. It's absolutely true. And chakra meditation is a very efficient, pragmatic way to do that, to assist in that process of self-examination. So we're meditating and being still to conserve that energy, to open our astral eyes, and to conserve that energy, to open our causal eyes. The more we conserve the energy of one dimension, it will transform into an energy of another dimension. And it flows both ways. If we're strongly inspired by an ideal, I'm going to fight for the liberation of my people, you'll endure tremendous pain and suffering, and it won't mean anything to you. Because you're inspired by an ideal that's totally above your personal like and dislike. I will suffer gladly to liberate my people. That's a thought. The thought motivates tremendous emotional suffering without complaint and physical hardship, possibly even death in the cause. And we obviously know that depressed emotions, physical weakness and sickness. Elevated emotions, energy, and I throw off sickness. So this flows both ways. We live in these three bodies all the time, and they interact with one another. There's a transformation. The energy of thought can completely change my physical health and my mental, emotional state. Just a thought. Just to be inspired by a religion, a belief, a cause. That's a thought. And how powerful these things are in the course of human affairs. So we've discussed, we want to awaken the chakras so that we can stand apart and conscious of our previously completely unconscious impulses and habits. And go like, wow, some of these impulses are good, helpful. Some of them aren't so good, aren't so helpful. And be able to consciously deal with them. To do that, we meditate on the chakras. Meditation is necessary. Meditation by definition and chakra meditation is bring your mind and your energy there with the techniques that we will explore. Shiva and Shakti. We need to meditate to do this. That in chakra meditation is what chakra meditation is. Mind and energy at a chakra. We need to do that to transform the chakras to a higher dimension. Flip side is meditating on a chakra, bringing more energy and consciousness there. The first thing it does is supercharge the samskaras that are already active there. So the initial stages of chakra meditation can actually lead to a greater instability of our mental and emotional life. Dr. Modayama refers to this stage as chakra instability. We must pass through it. If we don't meditate on the chakras, we will not become conscious of our samskaras, and we will not be able to transform them. But when we meditate on the chakras, the first thing we're going to do is supercharge the habits and desires that are operating from that chakra. And it's going to be very disturbing. Many people, when they start on a meditative life, they become aware from the first time of these deep, deep, rambling thoughts and emotions. And it's very disturbing to them. And they misinterpret that and say like, well, I was fine until I meditated. That's a misinterpretation of the spiritual life. Meditation simply made you aware, keenly aware, of what's just under the surface of your thinking. You know, Thoreau said a long time ago, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And if they sat and meditated on their chakras, they'd realize he's right. Meditation doesn't make us nervous or anxious, but meditation does make the samskaras more active. And if we don't have a broader scope of why we're meditating, which is why we've done this elaborate metaphysical presentation, if we don't have a broader scope of why am I doing chakra meditation in the first place, it's very likely that we will indulge in fantasies and justify our misbehaviors. We'll become overpowered with lust. We will become attractive to the opposite sex because this energy is arising in us. And we'll find all kinds of reasons of why I need to sleep with her and him and her and him and her. Because it's just who I am. As I looked inside myself, I found these energies there. And we identify with them and then we justify them. This is a very dangerous thing. This is why it's called chakra instability. This is why the techniques of meditation on the chakras were kept secret for thousands of years. Not because the great mystical saints wanted to keep the rest of humanity in the dark and downtrodden, but because the initial stages of a serious chakra meditation is going to stir up what's already active in us. The very samskaras that brought us into existence in this life and have been playing behind the stage of our consciousness is now going to be very much invigorated and empowered. And if we're not adequately prepared with a spiritual and philosophical view of why we're doing this, we will sink down into fantasies and justifications for our actions. And I don't think I need to point out how many scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal occurs in what at first are very well-meaning spiritual groups gathered together to help one another. I'm absolutely sure that, whether it's the Catholic Church or the ashrams that I've seen and read about, that none of those people entered into those organizations saying, this would be a great way to enact my sexual fantasies. I'm sure that they were inspired by the highest possible ideals. And when they embarked naively on their spiritual practices, it exaggerated their samskaras. But they had no framework in which to put that. And so they do what we all do as teenagers. You hide it, you're ashamed of it, you're embarrassed of it, you don't admit to it, but slowly it warps your mind and your behaviors. This happens all the time in the spiritual life. Chakra instability. Chakra meditation is a very powerful thing, seemingly simple, but this is why it was kept secret. And the reason why people like the Dalai Lama, Dr. Mottiyama, Paramahansa Yogananda, the reason why these beings now are talking openly about the chakras is there's a real need for a mature spiritual humanity to come forward. And these great beings say, the risk is worth the reward. The need is urgent now. We have sunk into a very low level of materialism. In the ancient days, everyone believed in the gods and the spirits and ghosts in the afterlife. And the precautions were, let's not give this guy a technique where he goes too quickly into these realms because he's going to be pulled off in all these directions. The modern world is completely different. The modern world, it's difficult for us to even believe in the afterlife. Unless you're with a group of yogis, you don't even discuss it. Scientists would laugh at you. The modern world is not overwhelmed with the sense of the interpretation of the spiritual realm into this one. The modern realm has a difficult time believing it really exists. We need powerful techniques to quickly move at least to glimmers of the reality of the astral realms and the causal realms. We need these techniques and we need them now. But we need to maturely discuss what's the risks. This is why it was kept secret. Because the risks are real. From the beginning of your interest in the chakras, if you pursue a meditative path, whether it's the techniques we present here or techniques that you investigate on your own, we must always be aware that this is what will happen in the stages of meditation. And we must guard against fantasies and justifications. Otherwise, chakra meditation won't help liberate us at all. It'll accelerate us further into a cycle of samsara. These instabilities could last for months, could last for years. And if you're an unexamined meditator, it's probably last our whole life and we wouldn't even know the impulses that are jerking us around until we die and we go, oops. So these instabilities are not a passing thing. We enter slowly into these periods of time and we need to be aware. These are subtle things. Normally we're not conscious of them. We need to be aware that this will happen. If we're forewarned, we're forearmed. Faith is the key to passing through chakra instability. If we maintain a clarity of purpose, why are we meditating? Why are we involved in a spiritual life? If we constantly revisit those scriptures that reinforce what is the ultimate goal of human life and spiritual life, it will shield us from fantasies and justifications as our sanskaras get stirred up. Non-attachment is the key. When we get an overwhelming lust and all of a sudden the opposite sex is finding us very attractive because the Shakti is moving, we need to not justify some reason why we should indulge in that now. We should maintain non-attachment and go like, wow, I'm really riddled with temptation right now. And I need to take 6 steps back. Non-attachment's important for that. We can't step back from our emotions and assess them if we're too embroiled in them. And then finally, spiritual community, which is kind of tied in with clarity of purpose. A sangha or a spiritual community is essential in this process because if we repetitively, publicly affirm, just by our attendance at a group or a meditation or a reading of scripture, if we publicly and repetitively affirm to a small group of others, could be 1 person, could be 12, could be 100, If we declare publicly, this is what we want, this is our aspiration, this is the person I want to be, and we maintain their company, then when we start to subtly slide into justifications of wrong behavior, they will call us on it. No one else is going to call us on it. That'd be rude. But if you share a sangha, if you share a shared purpose with other people, then when we're misbehaving, they're going to call us on it. Because we've declared over and over again what our intentions in our life are. So when our actions are hypocritical to what we're doing, they're going to draw it to our attention. That's the value of the sangha. A stranger isn't going to call to our attention that we're behaving or misbehaving. That wouldn't be appropriate. But a sangha will. This is very important. To do chakra meditation alone in a cave, you don't think you need other people. This is a delusion. It may be very likely that we won't find someone immediately who shares our propensity, our desire to meditate on the chakras. It may be that most of your life you will have your quote-unquote secret chakra meditation practice. But somehow, some way, we need to place before us and with us a group, a person, whose actions we admire, whose spiritual ambitions parallel our own. Maybe they don't meditate the way that we do. Maybe they have a completely different religious faith. But you're open to one another. You're honest to one another in your ambitions. This is why I'm meditating. And if you start to misbehave, they will call it to your attention.